This is the GamesIndustry.biz Microcast, recorded on Friday, May 3rd, 2024, for Tuesday, May 7th, 2024, because Monday is a bank holiday, and it feels cruel to make the video editing team work on their day off. I am James Batchelor, Editor-in-Chief of GamesIndustry.biz. I am joined, as always, by Head of GamesIndustry.biz, Chris Dring. Chris, I understand you got caught into discussions on Twitter again.
I don't tweet as much these days either. Yes. Well, it's around... I did a tweet talking about because we've got this event. You've got this event coming up, by the way. If everyone doesn't know, in June we've got it's sort of a, I don't know how to describe it. Is it an event, James?
It's an editorial event.
Yeah, we're doing a series of articles and podcasts and videos all around making games cheaper, faster, better. It's sort of reflecting the fact that video game development costs have spiraled upwards. And part of that conversation, it's not really sort of the headline part of that conversation. I mentioned that, game developers are also having to be, some game developers, to be clear, I'm not talking about everyone, are having to be a little bit more selective and looking a little bit closer at the data around what they're investing their time and money in, which is the time and money, same thing. And whether or not it's worth that investment. So if you've got a game that's got 30 levels in it, for instance, how many gamers are getting to the last 5? And you just have to ask yourself whether or not, it's worth the time. It's not, it's not often the thing that takes the most time, but how much is it worth that? If only 5% of your players, 10% of your players are getting to the end of your game, should you have spent that long on that part of it? That sort of thing. And I mentioned in that an example, if people aren't noticing the ray tracing in your games, is it worth the investment in it? And I then also mentioned frames per second in that, which is a dangerous thing to talk about. And this is linked to the new Paper Mario game that's coming out this week. Well, it's not new, it's a remake of the GameCube game, The Thousand Year Door, one of the best games Nintendo's ever made, actually. And the original game ran at 60 frames per second, but this remake runs at 30 frames per second, and it's caused a discussion, even though nobody can really tell on a game like Paper Mario, or at least I don't think they can. Nintendo Life did, and so when I did that tweet, there was a lot of people telling me I was wrong and 60 frames per second should be standard and game developers are lazy for not doing it and that kind of stuff. But then Nintendo Life, who's sort of one of our sister titles, did a poll where they asked their audience, do they care that it's 30 frames per second? And the vast majority of them went no. 20% of them said they were really disappointed by it, but only 5% of them said it was a deal breaker. Right, so if you're sitting there and you're making a Paper Mario game, it's not the biggest franchise in the world, even though it should be, and you are and you're sitting there working out where to put your investment and where to spend your time and money. Should you spend all that energy optimizing and trying to get the game to 60 frames per second stable, or do you just go, nobody really cares, let's just make it 30? And that's the whole point of it. But it sparked a conversation around that kind of stuff. And this is, by the way, Nintendo Life's poll is with Nintendo audiences. It's not with like the family and casual gamers that buy that machine that don't even know what frames per second means. But obviously it matters a lot more in other games and other types of titles. And I was using it as just an example of something that developers might be thinking about.
That's the thing. Like I understand with like first-person shooters, for example, like players prefer 60 FPS because it's smoother. But even then, like I've almost certainly played 30 FPS, shooters, and I have no idea what.
I play like. Perfect Dark and Golden. I'm pretty sure that ran at 5 frames at times.
Yeah.
But I'm actually. It's interesting. There was a study recently that says some people can't see. Some people's eyes don't see frames per second as fast as other people. And there was a real study about that. I think I'm one of those people. I've got a lazy eye. I only have sort of 2D vision. I really wonder if that's the reason why when everyone goes, what do you think of the frame rate? I'm like,
I was looking into this. Like some people get motion sickness from 60 FPS. Some people get motion sickness from 30 FPS. Like it can vary. Like it's. Yeah. I think the bottom line is like if it means. It's the whole performance versus quality modes that you get on like PlayStation 5 titles now. For example, like I always go performance because I'd rather it's a consistent frame rate than it is than it's just jerking every now and then. Like providing your game is consistently smooth and enjoyable to play, the frames per second shouldn't matter. And like you said, like there's so much of this stuff that I see developers getting like kind of raked over the coals by people, by some gamers on Twitter, like things like that, things like ray tracing. You mentioned ray tracing. I'm instantly flashing back to the Spider-Man Puddlegate of several years ago.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't.
They're looking for. People keep using the word lazy. It doesn't mean lazy. It's about budgeting. It's about what's worth the time and investment.
Yeah.
Because these games, you could spend. These games are costing 3 times as much to make now as they did 5 years ago. But the audience isn't 3 times bigger, and the audience isn't spending 3 times more money. So there needs to. In some cases, they are. Sometimes there's audience growth for some franchises, but there sort of needs to be some give and take. And it's not about laziness; it's about investment and time and that kind of stuff. And I just anyway, that topic is probably going to come up on GI Sprint. GI Sprint's actually going to go a little bit more in depth on things like concept stage and AI and cloud and all this. It's going to look a little bit deeper at the subject rather than just that sort of broad overview I did on the Twitter. But yes, it sparked a conversation.
Nice. Well,
let's talk about news.
We're going to be talking about some of the biggest stories from the past week, rather than just Chris talking on Twitter. One of the big stories, like literally from the last couple of days, has been Take-Two has reportedly shut down Roll7, so the UK indie behind things like Oli Oli and Rollerdrome. Is reportedly shutting down Intercept Games in Seattle. It's the Seattle-based studio behind Kerbal Space Program 2. Both of those are subsidiaries of Private Division, which was its indie-focused label. We've had from a source has said, a source told us that the vast majority of Private Division staff in Seattle, New York, Las Vegas, and Munich have been laid off. So, Private Division, the actual label, is taking a hit, not just the studios. We know that a Seattle office is closing. There was a WARN notice, I can never remember what it stands for, Workers and Regulatory Notification or something like that, was filed in Washington State saying that a Seattle office owned by Take-Two, affecting about 70 people, will be closed or will start closing in June. That's believed to be Intercept Games. There's been a lot of kind of upset around this. It's more closures. No closures are any more upsetting than the other. But I think there was a lot of love for Roll7 in particular, and there were concerns about Kerbal Space Program 2. There's a lot of people drawing the lines between. Well, hang on. Obviously, Take-Two's undergoing... This is part of Take-Two's ongoing cost-cutting program. It's the third program it's done of cost-cutting since February 2023. This is the first one to involve layoffs, and they warned last month, that they're going to be laying off 5% of their staff, so roughly 580 people. This is believed to be part of that. But you've got people drawing the lines of, well, hang on, why are they laying off 580 people and shutting down these studios when they've only just spent 460 million on buying Gearbox and they own GTA, the biggest. There's a lot of kind of grumbling around this, which I kind of understand. But
but I think that's just a company makes a load of money, so why are they cutting this thing? Well, they don't. The thing isn't working, right? And it's like if you want to invest in new areas and grow new areas or evolve the business, you have to sort of look at areas that you don't have to, but if there's areas of the business that isn't working for you, then something needs to change. I think Private Division's it's a bit of a shame actually, because there's a really ambitious. I remember when it launched, they were so ambitious, and they got Kerbal Space Program, that became part of the Private Division world. But they had Ancestors and the Outer Worlds, working with people like Panache and Obsidian and V1 and all these exciting new game developers, and the vast majority of it hasn't worked to the degree that it's worked. I've seen some of the quality of these games have been great, but it hasn't worked from a sort of financial perspective. I'm actually a bit surprised about Roll7. I got the impression that Rollerdrome was actually a modest hit, and Oli Oli seemed like a pretty stable franchise and brand. So I was a bit surprised that is even being talked about, really. But it's not just you call it an indie label, but some of these studios, like they're independent, but they're double A, right?
No, that's true. That's true. Like, was it one of their earliest titles for Private Division was like it was the Outer Worlds by Obsidian. Obsidian is independent. It is not indie. Yeah. Well, it's not independent. It's not even independent anymore.
And I think, aren't they working on a Game Freak title as well?
Yes.
Moon Studios game and the Bloober team, I think, and they were at some point, and they're working with Weta Workshop. Like these are names, right? And so it's an ambitious team. I have heard rumblings for a while that there's been concerns about Private Division's performance and what's been going on there. It is. And you look at what Take-Two's business is, and you look at GTA, and you look at NBA, and you look at some of the Zynga titles. and you think, and you put Kerbal Space Program 2 in that sort of,
yeah,
you can see why it's not a focus for Take-Two. And if they are losing money, or they're seeing, if the costs are getting too high for their business, they're looking to cut stuff. You can see why they might cut the sort of smaller developers. It's just a bit of a pity.
I think we talked about this recently, or certainly it's been covered on the site. Like Take-Two has been really struggling financially not really struggling, but has been suffering some financial struggles for the last couple of years. I think out of the last 8 quarters, 7 have been a reported loss. Obviously, it's got a much bigger business since it took over Zynga, as you say. There's a lot of kind of businesses to wrestle there within. You've got your core 2K games and 2K Sports, but then also you've got Rockstar, you've got Zynga, you've got Private Division. Like, there's a lot going on there, and yeah, as you say, this sort of cost-cutting program that they're doing is when they take a long, hard look at what is and isn't working. And yeah, unfortunately, it does. For all the ambitions that Private Division had and for the quality of games they released, it does sound like it's just not resonating.
Yeah, it's real job. And then there's a part of me that goes, Take-Two's the parent company, and they had, for a long time, it was basically Rockstar and 2K. That was basically it. And then they added this sort of indie publishing label thing, and I thought, well, it's more of an evolution of 2K, right? You could have done something there. And then they've got Ghost Story Games is this independent unit, right? And I start going, they've all got their own publishing teams, and it's like, surely if there's cuts to make, there's synergies across departments and stuff like that. But I don't. There's far smarter and more interested people than me who can who will be making these decisions. But yeah, it is. It's just. I hope. I would have thought Roll 7 would have been an acquisition target than a closure. Surely somebody wants.
We don't know if they've tried to sell it. Like, maybe the M&A space is just a little bit quiet at the moment. But even then, I can't imagine. Roll 7 is like a really. Yeah, it's a popular studio. It's an acclaimed studio. Like, I can't imagine it would have fetched too high a price tag. So,
even if it was a management buyout, I don't know. We'll guess we'll find out in the. We'll find out. Time.
I mean, if this is the frustrating thing, certainly from a journalist perspective, is like Take-Two hasn't confirmed any of this. This is all this is all gleaned from kind of financial filings and state notices and then rumours and so forth. There's no kind of confirmation. The only confirmation they've given is they keep issuing the same statement to everyone, which is on April 16th, Take-Two announced a cost reduction program to identify efficiencies across its business and to enhance the company's margin profile while investing for growth. As part of these efforts, the company is rationalising its pipeline and eliminating several projects in development and streamlining its organisational structure, which will eliminate headcount and reduce future hiring needs. The company is not providing additional details on this program. So no matter what the rumour is as to what's been shut, what isn't been shut, this is what they're responding with, is we are not providing any further details. Yeah. So we don't actually know. I wouldn't... It sounds believable in terms of we know for a fact that something in Seattle is closing. That is likely the Intercept Games. Roll 7, I reached out to the guys, I haven't heard back, so I suspect if they were able to say, no, that's not true, then they would have done so. If they do go under, if they don't get the option of a management buyout, I wouldn't be surprised if the Roll 7 team try to start up another studio again with as many of the same teams.
We're heading into speculation on speculation
we are.
Now, though.
So yeah. I'll stop there. But yeah, no, kind of ashamed to see what's happening at Take-Two. But the closures and layoffs rumble on. Another story we wanted to talk about was Microsoft's financials. This technically was from last week, but we kind of got caught up with the Embracer stuff and talking about Supercell with Neil on the last Microcast. So there was I wanted to kind of talk about this. The results were quite interesting because overall, gaming revenue was up. So this is for Q1, or calendar Q1. I think it's their Q3. 3 months ended March 31st, 2024. Obviously, we don't get actual figures because it's all mashed into the total Microsoft results. The overall Microsoft results are revenue was up 17% year on year to 61.9 billion, but a lot of that is because Microsoft's cloud has increased. Looking specifically at gaming, they said that gaming revenue is up 51% year on year. Xbox content and services revenue is up 62% year on year. Xbox hardware revenue is down 31%, and I kind of have to confess I kind of explored that a little bit more in the write-up, because that's actually the steepest drop in hardware we've seen since Xbox Series X and S launched in 2020, and it's 31% down year on year compared to the same quarter the previous year. That quarter the previous year, it was down 30%. So it's clearly just a rough quarter for Microsoft. Inevitably you saw the usual nonsense about Xbox is dead, Xbox is buried, like just absolute nonsense on Twitter. But I did see some interesting conversations around it. I believe Daniel Ahmed from Nico Partners actually pointed out that if you take away Activision, if you took Activision's earnings out of Microsoft, Xbox revenue is essentially down 5%. If
you take away the majority of their business, their revenues are down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things. If you take away that thing that they own, then but then there was Ars Technica did an interesting kind of exploration of hardware revenue. Hardware revenues up or down per quarter after launch, comparing Xbox, PlayStation 5, and Switch, and it showed that PlayStation 5's hardwares have increased. There have been a couple of losses. Switch has obviously increased over time. But you were talking, you were saying something just before we recorded about the hardware market in general.
It's in a terrible, it's not in a good spot. I was actually just with GfK yesterday talking about the UK market, and they showed me this graph about how this hardware generation, Switch is confusing things because it's been out for 8 years, and it's like, how do you compare that? But and they were sort of comparisons about how PS5 is doing against PS4. It's down. Right, it's tracking below PS4. So even Sony's not having a great time of it either. Xbox is really tough for Xbox. In hardware terms, I want to Xbox. The rhetoric, the gamers, the media love talking about the hardware battle. Right? They love the console war. Right? It's great. It's not great. It's annoying. But it's But Xbox is so much more interesting now than a platform holder, which I know platform holders are interesting, but they are probably the most powerful, and I'd argue the most interesting third-party games publisher generally on the market at the minute. They haven't had they've not had the best. Some of their games have sort of been great, like Hi-Fi Rush last year. Some of their games have been pretty good, like Starfield. Some of those games have sort of missed with Redfall. Forza Motorsport, I thought, was a miss as well. But you can get the sense there's momentum building behind Xbox now. I'm really looking forward to their showcase in June. I'm looking forward to Indiana Jones. I'm looking forward to finally hearing more maybe about Everwild and Perfect Dark. I can't wait to actually see what the Playground team were doing with Fable. And that's just Xbox Studios. Then you throw in Call of Duty, and what are they going to do with Crash Bandicoot? And could Tony Hawk's come back? And something and Bethesda's games, I mentioned Indiana Jones, but how are they going to capitalise on the recent popularity of the Fallout TV show? There's so much interesting stuff that we can talk to Xbox about now that isn't about how many boxes they've sold.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really excited for us to be able to move that conversation towards that point. I'm really hoping that we get to do that soon. I will. The numbers are going up. They're making more money. They've got a good lineup for the year. I think Hellblade looks interesting. I'm not actually that keen on the first Hellblade. I loved Enslaved by Ninja Theory, but I'm excited about looking at it. It looks fantastic. They're a really interesting company. They're doing some interesting things, but we just obsess on the hardware figure, which I think, frankly, over time will become one of the least significant thing about Xbox.
Yeah.
And I know their fan base might feel that that's a betrayal or a move away from what they're about, but they're still a platform. They've got platforms, whether that's Game Pass, whether that is the console, whether that's their cloud gaming. They're still a platform. They still act like a platform. They still commission games on a platform basis. They still support third-party developers and third-party publishers. They're still just the idea of what a platform is just now broader and more complicated. And if to focus purely on whether or not Xbox sales are up and down, it's been a tough generation for their hardware business.
Yeah.
That's true. And I'm not going to pretend it isn't, but I just think there's a lot more to this business now than the numbers. But the hardware market, the console market, is going through a moment of, we've been through moments like this where the console market's dead. I've heard this 100 times in my career at some point. But it is really hard at the moment to project out what the hardware market's going to do this year. We don't really have a clear idea of what Sony's lineup is. I think they're going to be at Summer Games Fest, so it'll be interesting to see if they've got anything there. Xbox's games, are they all going to be on Xbox? Are some of them going to come on PS5? What's that going to mean to sales of their hardware? It's difficult and makes that hard to project and predict.
So it's going to be a very interesting end of the year, and you can keep up with all the things that we find out over at GamesIndustry.biz. I'm going to wrap us up there because we are vaguely close to a micro length this time. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, whether you're listening on a podcasting platform of your choice or whether you're watching us on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in. Chris, thank you for joining me as always.
As always, I love this. This is my favourite thing. And, you know, I'm hoping the audio is better this week,
yes.
by the way. For all the people that keep telling us, we know we're working on it.
We do know we're working on it. This time we managed to turn Chris's microphone on. That's the big improvement. That's the big innovation this week, is Chris turned his microphone on. Thank you again so much for joining us. We're going to be back next Monday with your regular Microcast, and you can get more news, insight and analysis into the world behind video games at GamesIndustry.biz. And to get it all delivered straight to your inbox, sign up to the GI Daily at GamesIndustry.biz/newsletters. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.